This is RobinStudio, brought to you by RobinStudio. I would just like to note that this is a podcast primarily in Czech. However, if there is an interesting podcast guest like today, I am welcome to having it in English. Our today's guest is, former British professional rugby league player, rugby head coach at a local rugby league club in London, Elmbridge Eagles, and the former executive officer of the European Rugby League Federation. Our today's guest is Kevin Rudd. Hello.
Hello.
How are you doing?
I'm all right. How are you?
I'm doing quite well, thank you. Thank you for being here.
No, thanks for inviting me to do the podcast. It's always enjoyable to talk about rugby league.
Okay. You grew up in the north of England, so just to begin, I'm interested in how you actually got into rugby, and specifically rugby league.
Well, I was very fortunate. I grew up in the north of England, but my family was from right in the far north of England, which is Newcastle and Sunderland, and that's more a football, a soccer area, and they moved to Yorkshire just before I was born, and Yorkshire is famous for rugby union and rugby league. The two forms of rugby, and we can get into explaining the differences later. So I was very fortunate in the village that I grew up in, which is a little place called Garforth, and the nearest big town is Leeds, which is famous for football. It's also famous for rugby league and rugby union and cricket. So how did I start? Yes. Well, it started at school. I still remember the teacher. His name was Mr. Smith, and he suddenly said, and he turned up on his motorbike one day, and he was a bit of a rough diamond, and he just said, right, lads, we're going to start a rugby league team, and you're coming to training. And so that's where it started. So I went along, and from that first time of playing, I've still got friends from that first school team. So I must have been about 7 or 8 or something like that.
And so it was very fun for you to do.
Oh, it was great, and it was just, we had this cool teacher. He came on his motorbike to school, and he was a little bit different.
Why rugby league? Did you play rugby union as well?
I played rugby union as well, so I was very fortunate. And there was time in history so when I was young, one was very definitely professional and paid players, and one was an amateur game. And some people were a bit funny about it at the time, but I was lucky in the village that I grew up in. Nobody bothered, and we were just mates, and we used to go play rugby league, rugby union, cricket, football.
Anything goes.
Anything went.
Okay, rugby is a very divided sport. Let's say
historically, there was a split many years ago, and there are two main governing bodies of rugby in the world. One is Rugby League, Rugby Union. But originally it was all one form of rugby. But it split originally in 1895.
Okay.
So.
I want to talk about how it gradually got to the split, but if I read properly, then it started at rugby, football rugby, right?
Correct, in England. So in about the 1870s, 1880s, it was one sporting union, so all different regions around the UK were trying different forms of rules. So could you tackle with your feet? Could you tackle with your arms? Could you pass forwards? Did you pass the ball with your feet, or did you pass the ball with your hands? And there was lots of different regions around the country which had different forms of the game. And then some people played with an oval ball, some people played with a round ball, but originally it was all one federation.
So not normal football, also soccer.
Soccer, yeah.
Plus rugby.
Yeah. So
was there anything else?
So no, it was. I mean, it goes. I mean, the old ancient thing going back hundreds of years ago in the UK used to be a ball of some kind was made, and you had to get it from one village to another, and then the other people in the other village tried to stop you getting that ball across. So that was one of the first, types of ball sport in England, for example. But it was all one sporting federation. The first split came in about 1870s, where some people decided, we want to play with a round ball, we want to play with an oval ball, we want to pass the ball with our hands, we want to pass the ball with our feet.
Okay, so it started with football
and rugby union. So it was all one thing together, and eventually they came up with 2 sets of rules, and then football spread across the globe. Rugby union wasn't as, I guess, widespread in the 1880s, 1890s.
So rugby, football rugby split into football and rugby first.
Yes.
And then it was just rugby without the league or union.
Correct.
And how did they split?
So the well, even the clues in the title now. So in England, it's still called the RFU, Rugby Football Union, and it stems from that time when it was all together with football. So they kept that tag, that Rugby Football Union. But there was a split, and it went something like this. It was more of a social divide going on in the country, if you like. So in 1895, there was a view in the north of England, where I'm from. So I've got to be careful because I'm from the north, but now I live in the south. And even with my accent now, so when people meet me, they know I'm from the north of England. So I've got to be careful. I'm not biased towards the Northern Union opinion of things, but it was more or less along the lines of a social divide. People in the north were predominantly people who worked in industry or textiles or mines, hard manual labour, hard manual work. And a lot of the villages across the north of England, it's famous for coal mining, textiles. It was hard work. And the people in the north believed that if players played, because you've got to remember that people were paying money to watch this, it was a form of entertainment. And they were getting big crowds of 20,000 people turning up to watch these games, and they were paying money to go watch these players. And in the beginning, in the early 1890s, nobody was being paid anything. And what was happening? Some of the players were getting injured because it was a physical, confrontational game, which rugby is. It's a confrontational contact game, and a lot of the players got injured, so then they couldn't go to work. Now, in those times, when there weren't, social systems to support people if you were off work and help provide for the family, they had no way of providing for the family. So if they damaged themselves or broke a bone or had a serious injury, how did they pay to keep that? So it was a problem, and it was called broken time payments. That's the official thing in the history books. The people in the north believed that if a man was off work, he should be entitled to broken time payment. So if he can feed his family. The people in the south of England, again, a huge generalisation. You had a lot of people that worked in legal firms, banking, business, doctors, lawyers, solicitors. So a lot of jobs that were, more mental capacity rather than physical hard labour. So if they got injured, in many ways, they could still carry out their working life. So they didn't have the problem of providing for their family. So the general attitude in the South was no. And you've got to remember, at this time in sporting history, lots of sports were grappling with professionalism in sport, and different things have gone. Tennis, athletics, cricket, soccer, rugby, they've all grappled it in their own way about how they dealt with should players be paid to play sport. Well, Rugby League was one of the first ones that said, well, we think players should be paid because of this issue about, if they can't feed their families because they get injured and they can't do their day job, then they should be paid. So, but the first split was actually, it wasn't Rugby League and Rugby Union. It was actually called, the names were the Northern, and this is in England, the Northern Union and the Southern Union, and that's what the names were. And there was a big meeting. It's a famous meeting, 1895. I'm very fortunate to have met, so when I was a young boy, one of the early influences on me in Rugby League, some of his ancestors had been at this first meeting, and so this goes back to 1895, where they made a decision, and a bunch of clubs in the north of England said, well, we believe we should be paid, or we should be able to pay the players, so therefore we're going to start the Northern Union. And there was a split. And for the first 10 years, what people don't realise is they both played the same rules. So the Northern Union, Southern Union, between 1895 to about 1906 or 7, something like that, they played the same rules. And that was the beginning of the split. And then once you have two governing bodies controlling two different sports, they then marketed and developed the rules of their competitions to suit what they thought was the right thing to do. And then eventually the name changed to Rugby Football League, Rugby Football Union, and Rugby Union Rugby League. But originally there was just a split in England, and it was just called the North and South Union. They played the same rules.
Okay. How were the local clubs? How did they deal with the change in the split in?
It was difficult.
Rugby League and Union.
It's still, you still get even now to modern days, you still get regions within the UK which are quite fanatical about one type of rugby. But it's changed a lot because now modern times now, the original argument was about money.
Yeah.
Well, now, guess what? Rugby Football Union, Rugby Football League, they're both professional. So they're all paid now. So the original cause of the argument, this social divide, is no longer there. But these games have exploded in different ways and their rules, and it's attracted different types of player and different types of, I guess, social background of people to different forms of rugby.
So what are the main differences between League and Union today?
Okay, so the main differences today, the one that is probably more famous internationally is Rugby Union. That's people recognise Twickenham, they'll understand the All Blacks from New Zealand. Rugby League, it's I guess it's stronger in Australia than Rugby Union is in Australia, and generally speaking, you have two professional leagues. One is called the NRL in Australia. Yeah. One is the Super League based out of the UK, which also has teams from Canada and the French teams in as well. The main difference is in the rules. There's different point scoring systems for tries, drop goals, conversions, penalties. So there's a different point scoring system, but the fundamentals are the same. They're both games of invasion. You're trying to invade the opposition's territory, and you're trying to score a try. A try is scored by placing the ball downward pressure over the try line, and that's how you score a try.
So if the basics are the same of Union and League, why can't we join them back up? Well, if the basic problem of League, or difference between League and Union, is now gone.
Well, I guess things become culture, becomes a local culture, local societies. Some people have become fanatical about their sport, and they don't want any other sport. So actually bringing them together, technically you could come up with a set of rules that would satisfy both. You'd have to make some compromises on both sides of the fence, but technically you probably could come up with a set of rules. It's just like you could probably come up with a compromise between American football and rugby, for example. You could come up with some system that compromises. But the two games have developed in different ways to attract different players. Generally speaking, and again, I've got to be careful with my bias, because I do like both games. I've coached both, I've played both. I've played rugby sevens, rugby nines, which are short versions of both. But at the highest level now, the differences aren't too much. But as you come down the levels, you can see the faster paced game. To me, rugby league, the ball is in play, in the hands with players making a decision. The ball is in play more. There's less stoppages. So as soon as you lose the ball, the key thing in rugby league is you get 6 tackles. At the end of 6 tackles, you either kick to the opposition or you hand it over, and then it's their turn. Yeah. And whereas in rugby union, you can have it and you keep hold of it, and then you can have 20, 30, 40 phases of play, and you might creep forward half a metre or 5 metres, but if you keep hold of it, and keep possession, you can have unlimited opportunities to attack the opposition. The key difference rugby league is when you're tackled, there's a big call of held, and that means stop play, everyone get back on side, and you release the man that's being tackled. He's being stopped. That's held, that's one. And the tackled player keeps hold of the ball. Whereas in rugby union, once you're tackled and your knee touches the floor, you must release the ball. And then the ball, people can try and win. So there are fundamental differences in the laws, and they are laws of the game. They're not rules, they're laws of the game. You've got to play to the laws of the game.
What about Rugby World Cups? Are there two?
So yes, the oldest one is Rugby League, which is interesting. That goes back to 1954, and the first one was held in France, and the winners were Great Britain, and they played as Great Britain then, which was Scottish, Welsh, Irish, English players together. And the trophy was actually won by, and I got to meet him, he was actually a Scotsman, a chap called Dave Valentine, and there's a statue to him outside Huddersfield Stadium, which is in the north of England. I actually coached his grandson as well at one point, so that was quite nice. But there's difference. World Cups in rugby union, rugby league. There are two. It's no different. So there's a World Cup in cricket. There's a World Cup in football. So these are just governing bodies, international governing bodies that have these tournaments. The bigger known one is, I would suggest, is rugby union. It has a higher profile, but rugby league has its World Cup next year, and it's growing all the time. And there are more countries still learning about the game because it's still, there are countries out there that don't even know it exists.
Okay. And is there hate between the two nowadays?
Hate?
On your rugby league? No, not you.
So not from me, but there are
from
but like it's almost like a religious thing. There are some people that will only see the best in one thing, and that's like anyone in life. It could be a supporter of a certain type of art, a certain type of music, but there are fanatical supporters that cannot see past their own sport, and that's fine. I'm probably somewhere in the middle. I like all sports, but I just favour the one that that's given me so much in life. Which is rugby league.
What about the Olympics?
The Olympics, well, that's an interesting one. So rugby union has, I think they got into the shortened version. Rugby union in sevens, I think, has become part of the Olympics. I think it did a few years ago. And that's important for countries that aren't traditionally rugby nations, or that's well known for rugby, because I believe once it becomes an Olympic sport, then governments have to provide some kind of central funding to support if there's whether it be, I don't know, whatever country it may be. So it is significant that I think rugby sevens being part of the Olympics. There is a shortened version of rugby league, which is rugby league nines.
So they're both there.
So they both have a shortened version, and then there's a world championship at rugby league nines, and the last one was held about a year ago, I think.
Okay. So as the executive officer of the Rugby League European Federation, where you played a role in supporting or promoting rugby out of the UK.
Yes.
Well, what did you precisely do?
It was great. It was a fantastic job, fantastic position. I was privileged to do it, and it came after lots of years of helping Scotland Rugby League. So prior to getting involved, I'd been involved as a player, a captain, a coach at lots of different international levels, and helping form a national governing body for the sport in Scotland. And then because of that experience, I was invited to get involved with a wider remit and helping other people in other countries. So my remit was to promote and help establish the sport and governing bodies in different countries, and then help organise international competitions and tournaments between people at different age groups and different categories. So that could have been wheelchair internationals, it could have been women's internationals, it could have been schoolboy, like under 16, under 18, university internationals, amateur internationals, plus senior full internationals. So, and if somebody had written in, so let's create if somebody had written in to the European Federation for the first time, saying they'd heard about this game and how, could someone explain a little bit about it? It would have come to me, and it would have been my responsibility to contact anyone in new territories for the first time. And then if they were interested in trying to get into the game and start the game, then eventually I would go out to the country and I'd meet them, and then we'd try and get a group of people together that would be interested to form the first team and management of group of people that wanted to promote the game.
Okay. And for rugby league, in many countries, rugby union was already established, and you came there to help establish a rugby league.
Yes.
How was that experience? What was it?
It's quite an interesting.
Welcoming, or
It depends. So in a lot of, at the time, so this is going back about 10, 15 years when I first started doing it. And some of the developing countries in rugby, they didn't have professionalism.
Yeah.
So it was only the top nations around, maybe the top 20, that were paying players in rugby union. And then, so, there were examples where I got involved in Germany, Serbia, Greece was another one, where, and rightly so, people were worried about that rugby league was going to come and take players away from rugby union. But the way we've always tried to structure rugby league seasons is we try to make the rugby league be outside the rugby union season. So in some of these countries, if you've only got a limited number of players and teams, you can't keep playing each other 4, 5, 6 times a year. So we try to establish rugby league seasons in the rugby union off season, and generally that's how it works. For example, in Scotland, Wales, Ireland, and a number of other countries. So then you're not going into competition; you're offering something additional. It allows people that want to play rugby all the year round to play rugby union and rugby league and play rugby all the year round, and they learn a new set of skills because the skills for rugby league are different to rugby union. So it gives them an extra, what I call an extra set of gears, which then they can take into rugby union, and it normally improves their development in rugby union as well. So there were some situations where it was very harsh, and there were several times when I actually had to go to the European Parliament because people were being threatened that if they played a game of rugby league, they would be banned from playing for their rugby union club. And in amateur, if there was professional contracts involved, then fine. I can get that. But these were just amateur associations, and they were threatening to ban people if they. So it'd be like me saying, "Okay, I'm field hockey, you're ice hockey. If you play a game of ice hockey, you're not coming to play field hockey," and it's just not appropriate if there's no professional contracts involved. So there was a few times I had to get involved. I was very polite and courteous about it, and generally reasonable people, once they realise that you're not out to steal players or steal facilities, or you're just offering something different, and generally it's gone okay. So there are a number of countries now that have realised that, have accepted it, and then the sports coexist.
Okay, so only for our Czech listeners, you've got a Czech Rugby League Association T-shirt.
Absolutely.
You helped establish maybe a rugby league in the Czech Republic.
Correct.
How was that experience?
Oh, it's fantastic. So there was I was very fortunate. There was so during this time of setting up new nations in the sport, I'm very fortunate I had many friends that lived in different countries and through my own sporting past. But this was a unique one. The one in Czech, you could not make up the formation of it. It actually started with someone close to your own heart, Pippa Schuff. And she went to, I think it was an antenatal class in Czech Republic, and it was for people that had international families, where parents are from different countries. And she met a Czech guy, his name was Milan Martinek, who was married to an English woman. And he played rugby union for the Czech Republic, I think about 20, 30 times. He'd been to see some rugby league games in England when he'd been to see his wife's family, and she'd taken him up in the north of England, and he liked the game. And then he met Pippa, and Pippa said, "Oh, I've got this, crazy friend of mine, and maybe you should meet." And then one Christmas we met. So he was over seeing his in-laws in England, and I arranged to meet him. And after that meeting, I went across to the Czech Republic, and we got a bunch of players and a bunch of volunteers, a mixture of expats in living in Prague, so Australian, New Zealand, British, and a mixture of people that from Prague and different regions, Brno, Pardubice was another one, I think. And they were all interested in having a go at this rugby league. And that was the beginning. And we formed a national body. And then from there, we got the first international games and the first group of players. And I was a guest coach for a number of times, and I went backwards and forwards for a while. And then once they were a little bit more serious, we then got a good British coach, an Irish guy called Gerard Keenan. And then he helped the Czechs prepare for their first international games. And then from there, there's a domestic competition. So that's about 10, 15 years ago. And
so it's quite grown.
So it's grown. So I think now there's about 6 or 8 clubs, and I think there's some junior clubs as well, like teenagers. And they still play international games, and they play in World Cup qualifiers, and they have done for a number of years. And so the rugby league is still in existence. So. But that's how it began. It started with this just set of coincidences, and that's sometimes how it works. And then just people that wanted to give it a go. And just get up and have a go. And then also it was done in Czech Republic, it was done very smartly. So all the people that wanted to start rugby league, they politely talked to people in rugby union and said, look, we're thinking of doing this outside of the rugby union season. Would you mind? And generally the cooperation was pretty good, I think, in the Czech Republic. And I think that was partly down to some of the characters. The fact that, Milan had represented his country in rugby union, I think that was respected.
Well, what other countries did you help establish rugby league?
Oh, I was very fortunate. There was a number, let's go through them. There was Latvia, Germany, Netherlands, Jamaica, Serbia. Where else? A few others. Norway. I also visited Pakistan, and there's still a little fledgling group there going there now. Estonia, that fell by the wayside. Morocco. So I got involved. I was really fortunate to travel.
Mainly European countries, then asking you to help them.
So that was my remit, but then it was spread a little bit further. So that's when I got involved with Jamaica, and the reason being there's a large group of people in the north of England that have Jamaican ancestry. So it made sense to connect the group in the north of England with the people in Jamaica, and then between them they've forged and what's nice is they've actually, so from the beginnings of Jamaican Rugby League, about 15 years ago, they've qualified for the World Cup next year, and I can't remember who they've got in their group, but it's pretty tough. I think it's like Australia, and they've gone on an incredible journey from nothing, no facilities, no ball, no pitch, no management, just an idea. So going from an idea, it's like building a business, a dream, and there's a lovely man who's still involved right from the beginning, Romeo Monteith, comes from Kingston in Jamaica, and he's gone on an incredible journey, and just combining all these Jamaican links around, because there's Jamaican links in Australia too, and just they call it, I think the technical word is the diaspora. That's people of Jamaican origin that have spread across the world, and then linking them up to the people in Jamaica, and then generating. They have a domestic competition there. They have a college competition. They have juniors, and it's all down to the work of a few people that are it becomes their job. They're paid to do it as a development officer, but then it relies on a lot of volunteers that just get a lot from the sport, and no different to volunteering running your local amateur soccer club or whatever it may be.
Okay. So you were talking about with the Czech Republic that they asked rugby union if they're okay with that. Were there some countries in which the rugby union organisations weren't happy with it being established? Yeah,
there was a few like that. And that's what I was explained. I had to go to Europe. I had to actually. I had to go to some. At the time, it was some British politicians. So what they call European. It was the members of European Parliament, and there was a group of British politicians that I had to get them to ask questions of a number of sports ministers in different countries to explain why the banning of players from playing another sport was acceptable in their country. And obviously there's no answer to that, because it's a breach of it's just amateur sport, and how can you ban somebody for playing, because they play one sport, how can you ban them from playing another amateur sport? It was ridiculous. So once that had been done in 2 or 3 countries, I think the message went back to the IRB, as it was then, which is the International Rugby Board, and I think people just went, this is silly, what are we doing here? And so it's just another opportunity for people to represent their country, another sport. It could be table tennis, it could be lacrosse, it could be hockey, whatever it may be. It's just another opportunity for people in life, and that's why we got some help. And these days, I would say, I don't think so. As people that since I stepped down from the role, a couple of other people have taken on the role. I don't think they have the same issue now. So I think that people have realised there's no, what's the point? Let people have the choice, and that's all it's about.
Mm-hmm. What other countries need could be established in rugby league?
Well, the one that's always the sleeping giant, I guess, is Russia. And they've dabbled with it over the years, and I used to spend a lot of time in different regions in Russia. And it's just getting, again, it's all about, you've got to get the central organisation right, and if you can get that right, then it lays the foundations, to get people attracted to your sport and to run a good competition, and then get to the standards of coaching up, so that then the top players can compete against top players from other countries. So it has its challenges, but I'm still hopeful that one day Russia will do quite well. I think Serbia keep doing quite well, and another one that will do quite well eventually is the Ukraine. I think they will do quite well.
Okay. Just change of topic, and now I've found some statistics about the weight of professional rugby players. The average England rugby player weighed 92 kilos in 1994, I think, and it was 104 kilograms in 2014. How do you view this change in the weight of the professional players?
So give me the dates again, from when?
1994.
Yep.
92 kilograms, and 2014, 104.
Oh, that's interesting. So, so these are probably statistics for rugby union.
Yeah, and it's probably the same with league, no?
Well, it's slightly different because the dates are significant. So, rugby union officially turned professional in 1995. And part of it, there was a number of cross-code games. So they played, rugby league teams played rugby union teams, rugby union rules, and rugby union teams played rugby league. Yeah. And when they did these, the difference in athleticism was noticeable. And because of the professional coaching in rugby league and the professional conditioning and the strength and conditioning and all the weight training that went into rugby league, it was noticeable. And it's no coincidence that when rugby union turned professional, they got a number of top coaches from rugby league to go and work in rugby union and work on the conditioning programs and the weights and the training, and that's what it's about. So the strength and the conditioning and a lot of it has become professional. And real full-on, and all the top players now, they have their own individual conditioning regimes, and there's a lot there that tries to target certain weights and strengths, and that'll be why the average weight, I would suggest, has gone up. Do I expect it to go up again in 20 years? Not as significant a jump, I wouldn't say. Maybe it's marginally, but part of it is this change from amateur to full-time professionalism, and then full-time strength and conditioning plans for players.
Even in both sports, the more weight, the better, or does that work? Or?
No, it's a balance, isn't it? So there are certain positions where you want a little bit more power, But rugby league, it's power and pace. There's no big point in becoming this huge hulking figure.
So you need to run fast.
You need to have agility
so you don't think it'll get...
So I don't, it's creeping up a little bit, but you need to have a certain agility, and depending on what rules they change, you can affect, the kind of conditioning you need for the players. So, for example, in rugby league, a big thing is that after a tackle, you must retreat 10 metres. That requirement to move up and back 10 metres means the players need to have good agility, good anaerobic fitness, so they can move up and back very quickly 10 metres, and you've got to do it 6 times. Rugby union, it's back foot of a ruck, so they don't have this moving up and back. So generally, you'll find different shapes of players. So, and also in rugby union, there's more lineouts. That's where the ball's thrown in from the side. There's more scrummages, which needs certain skills. Whereas in rugby league, there's not so many scrums or lineouts. It's more about the ball in hand and ball going through the hands and making some space and scoring.
So you think rugby union, the players would be a bit more bulked up or a bit bigger?
For certain positions.
I just want to ask about COVID-19. You were forced to stop training for several weeks at your local club and Elmbridge Eagles, and all of the clubs across the UK. Many of my previous podcast guests, were talking about this COVID-19 as an opportunity. Do you view it the same way, or
it's been a challenge? So let's just put it in perspective. So the way the season runs, the sporting calendar in the UK. So generally you have rugby union and soccer goes from September to about March. Rugby league and cricket is played March to about August. So when the COVID pandemic struck in the UK, the 2 sports that generally are played in the summer are cricket and rugby league. So those are the 2 sports that have really been in the front line of trying to cope and come up with systems and rules to being able to continue some form of training and participation in the sport. So as I don't no longer work full-time professionally in the sport. I just volunteer my time in my local club, working with the local teenagers here, and I try and help with the guys that are going to go on to professional rugby as well, but equally ones that just want to play for fun in their local community. So it's been a challenge in the sense that rugby, and whether rugby union or rugby league or any let's other contact sports like martial arts or boxing, it's been very difficult because by the nature of the sport, it attracts people. It attracts people that like contact. They like the physicality of it. You take that physicality away, then why are they doing it? So it's been a challenge there just mentally for some people. Why am I doing this now? Because we can't do some of the main aspects of the game. And I guess ice hockey has a little bit of that physicality when they play. So it's been a real challenge because you couldn't be within 2 meters of anyone. You couldn't touch, you couldn't contact, you couldn't shake hands, you couldn't, but we adapted. So we did what they call, like using the technology. We did Zoom training sessions where everybody was in their own homes, and we did some fitness training sessions via the internet and via technology. We used these Zoom training sessions, and we did that for about a month to keep the kids active because the families were asking for it. Because all of a sudden you had all these young men and young girls that had been used to physical activity and exercise and doing it with their mates. And all of a sudden you take that away, then they get a little bit frustrated and a bit upset. So we started with that. And then gradually we've been allowed to, after government relaxation, and then also our national governing body for the sport, which is the Rugby Football League, which I touched on. That's who controls it in England. And likewise, the European then coordinates between all the national governing bodies of different countries. So we've had to follow all these guidelines, and they've changed week to week to week. And then each community club and their coaching volunteers, or the professional clubs, their staff, they've had to adapt their coaching sessions to suit what they could and couldn't do. So has it been an opportunity? It's been an opportunity in the sense of it's been our opportunity to show that we're decent people and to what I call front up to all the members and people in the local community that says, look, we've tried our best and we've tried to adapt. And generally, the local community around here have been supportive. And then in other regions, in rugby league clubs across the UK, generally it's been supportive. And now training's starting to resume, and we're starting to relax that we're allowed to start playing some form of tag rugby, but it's still not the full contact tackling, and we can't do full contact tackling and all the physicality in training yet, because obviously people are in so close proximity that it's just not, the science isn't for it yet. So, but it's been a real challenge. I've been. When did I first? I first started coaching when I was a teenager. So I used to coach the younger ones in my village up in the north there. And it's been one of the toughest years for coaching. It's been a real test and challenge for everyone because it's also trebled the amount of time. So it's now not just the coaching time, because of all the hygiene standards and the cleaning down required of equipment and setting up prior to a session. You need just as much time to set up, to do the session, and then after the session, you've got to then clean everything down, so it's all spotless for the next time someone comes to use it. So it's been a real challenge. But I like to think at our little club, we've held our own, and I think generally the families are pretty supportive. But we're still quite a way away from having contact games. The highest professional level in rugby league, the Super League, and in Australia, the NRL, they have commenced full-time professionalism and they're playing games again. There are no crowds going to watch, but these are televised games, and they've begun, but they're under stringent testing regimes. So the players will be tested, and all the coaching staff, they'll be tested like maybe three times a week, and if there's any outbreak, isolation, and all the rest of it. And it's similar to, I guess, football across different countries.
Okay, so you talked about how the government has made it treble the time of preparation for the rugby league lessons. So, do you view has the government supported you enough?
Oh yes, I'm not criticising the government. I think the government's done all they can. So how it works, there's it comes under the sports minister, or it might be sports culture. Can't remember what title he's got these days, but so the sport department of the government will work with each of the governing bodies of all the different sports, and then also there's an organisation called Sport England. And Sport England help. You can apply for grants to help with your local community clubs and things like that for purchasing equipment and things like that. So the government's been quite helpful. They've coordinated between all the different governing bodies for sports. So their scientific officers will meet with the head of medical staff for the RFL, for example, and there'll be conversations about what's acceptable, what's not, based on what science. So I think they, in difficult situations, I think they've done as well as they can do. And then, just on the end of it, you're a club that has to respond, follow the latest guidelines, and make it work, and still try and make it fun, because that's what it's about, So if the players are having fun and they're enjoying it, and the families are enjoying it, and it's safe and they feel comfortable, they'll keep coming. And it doesn't matter, whether it's football, rugby league, cricket, ice hockey, field hockey. If you get that environment right, where people feel safe and secure, and it's controlled, and they're learning things in a fun environment, then Normally you get a good engagement.
Okay, before we move to the next topic, is there something you would like to add to rugby or rugby league?
For Czech people, have a look, check Rugby League, and have a go, get involved, try something new. There's an organisation out there, there's teams in different cities, there's a website out there as well. They're decent people that run the sport there, and if you get a chance, if you like the idea of a physical sport, give it a go. It's a test of the body and mind. So that's all I'd say. Give it a go.
Okay. What inspiration other than sport or rugby do you have?
For me?
Yes.
Me personally?
Yes.
Okay, that's interesting. So, we all have things in our lives, but for me, it's music. So it goes back from, again, same kind of time as a young boy. For me, it was came in a time in British history where in the 1970s where things were a little bit tough, and there were strikes and there was a lot of unhappiness across the country, and there was a type of music that was born out of this, and it was punk. It was old punk music, and it was kind of a bit rebellious, and it was basically saying, have a go. Don't be just told that you can't do things, and don't be told you're not good enough. And there was an attitude, and punk music kind of came out of this feeling of, no, have a go. So whatever your thing is. So there are people across all sectors of the community in different fields, whether it's TV presenters, football players, artists, other musicians, that were influenced by this music, this movement, which was basically saying, don't be told you're not good enough. Don't be told you can't do something. Have a go. And it was all through this medium of a style of music. And it was quite, I guess it was quite rebellious. It was standing up and saying, no, you can stand up for yourselves, have a go. Don't be told. And still now, it's a similar spirit. It's up to people to make of their life what they will, and that was the fundamental core of all this thing, which was have a go. And it's no different now. So when I get young fellas along that for the first time that are 12, 13, 14, if this sport speaks to you and you enjoy it, have a go. If it doesn't, find something that does. Okay.
You talked about the social divide and rugby.
Yes.
There's a social divide in punk. Is there
was it a social divide?
Or maybe not, but what they talk about.
Well, I guess at the time in the music industry, when this music came around, I guess there wasn't much. I guess it goes back to the old class system in the UK, working class. So coming from a working class background, you'll be told what to do, and that's where you'll stay in life. And there's a little bit of that in British culture. There was an upper class, there's a middle class, and I guess the punk movement came from the working class, where it kind of goes, no, I am good enough, and I can do something different, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this with my life, and I'll get the qualifications. That means I can do this job, or whatever it may be.
It's political as well.
So it was at the time. Yes, it was very political at the time, because a couple of the bands that played, the politicians didn't know how to deal with it. It was almost like
what was the message from the bands?
Well, it was basically it was just. I guess it was a frustration. It was a frustration about the fairness of society. Give everyone a fair shot. It's not just for middle classes and upper classes to keep their positions and not keep everybody else in their station in life. I think there was a little bit of that. So, and I guess that I've been very fortunate. I've got to work with and operate at all levels of society in the UK and then wider internationally. So whether you're from the wealthiest families, whether you're from royal family, whether you're from political class, whether you're from working class, for me, things like sport and music can be a great leveller. And what I mean by that is, if you can do it, then it doesn't matter what your other baggage is. You're gifted at what you do. I guess where some of the frustrations came about was that, did everyone get a fair chance to do everything or to try everything? And I guess that was the kind of the message that came out of punk, which was, whatever you want to do, have a go. Have a go. Don't be held back. If you need to work 2 jobs and then go to night school to do whatever, photography or fashion or whatever you want to do, have a go at it. If you want to be a professional sportsman, have a go at it. Put yourself into it.
So is this message now complete, or is it?
Well, I think it's a theme. I think with what's going on around the world now, I think there's always room for a little bit of that. But it was just at this time in history in the UK, there was a little bit of unrest.
Yeah.
And it just grew out of this frustration, I think. And so the music is still played now, and yeah.
Do you like the music, or do you like the message of the music?
Well, the music's sometimes it's the combination. So the words to the songs are normally, there's normally something of meaning in there where you might have resonance with your own life or your own views on life. So it was the first time, I guess, for me, where there was almost like a political message in the music. Or a view that said, no, have a go, be positive, stand up for yourself.
Yeah.
And I think that's important in any country or any walk of life. Have a go and stand up and be as good as you can be. And that's about the size of it.
So what's your favourite punk band?
My favourite punk band? Well, one of the I guess the most famous one was a band called the Sex Pistols.
So they started it, right?
Yes,
the Sex Pistols.
Yes, they were at the beginning. Yeah, it was them, and there was a few other bands, the Damned, the Clash, and there was a bit of a movement that developed from there. And then it was basically saying to them, have a go, have a go for yourselves. It wasn't, and it was kind of spontaneous across the country in different regions, and different groups of people had a go, and different bands grew up in different regions. But I guess they were the instigators. But my favourite punk band was inspired by the Clash, and there was an Irish band called Stiff Little Fingers. Stiff Little Fingers are still touring now, and I'd recommend, if you get a chance to go see them live, you should, just for the energy. For someone to keep doing something for so long up on stage and performing, and still performing well, and still filling out venues across the UK, I think that says something about them.
Okay. Thank you for being today's guest at the podcast. Is there anything you'd like to add?
Oh yes, if there are people out there interested in music, you want to see some old school punk. If you ever get a chance to go see any of these old bands like the Dead Kennedys or Stiff Little Fingers or Anti-Nowhere League, while you still can, while they're still on this planet, please do. Go see them. It's an experience, and the energy. But likewise, if there's another form of music that's coming up around you in your neck of the world, if it's got a positivity to it, and a sense of hope, and a message of improving things, get involved with that as well. Why not?
Thank you for being today's guest.
No, thank you.